Didn't I say that hive cities are a rich environment? Everything imaginable exists within their honeycomb structure. Hive Primus on Necromunda is not a city made purely of metal and corrosion. There is wood, I promise you. Okay, maybe it is timber-like substances, reconstituted from fauna, flora and fungus. Lots and lots of fungus. Nevertheless, there is timber, and possibly trees. Not lots of trees, but some. Contentious? Maybe. Let's see how to bring this into our Necromunda world build. In this episode, I'll show you how to sculpt rotten and aged timber that will sit comfortably within the Necromundan Underhive aesthetics. This includes painted timber that is chipped and flaking away. If you're not into sculpting, don't worry, I have something for you too. Now, I know, some of you will challenge the existence of wood in the Underhive from a lore perspective. There are counter-arguments, however, to explain how it could be present. The first being Necromunda was once a resource-rich world that was selected by the Imperium to be harvested, treated wood in mild airflows with the introduction of conditioners and protected from water and moisture, including not touching soil aggregates, can last for millennia. And that is with today's technology. We already know that very different microclimates exist between domes of the hive city honeycomb structures. Therefore, it is not unreasonable to suggest that in the 41st millennium, there is wood that has been treated and kept in environments that maintain stability. Secondly, if you want to quote lore to me, think about this. The jungle planet Cybao is covered in steel palm trees, an immensely strong wood, used for a variety of construction purposes. It is a common export from Cybao and is likely to be imported by the wealthy in Necromunda and then probably later discarded. Last of all, there is an abundance of fungus growing within the Underhive. What's to say that this fungal matter couldn't be reconstituted into a fibrous product that resembles timber? This is exactly the route of thinking the contributors of the sump hulk have taken and named it slagboard. And they are not alone. Blackboard is described in the name given for this material in the Necromunda novel Termination Overkill, a board made out of compressed mushroom starch. Dan Abnett mentions blackboard throughout his book series too, such as Gaunt's Ghosts, Ravener and Eisenhorn. There are a variety of ways that we can make timber boards, studs, bearers and joists when constructing timber in our builds. Scale modelers will turn to balsa wood for its weight and softness. It is incredibly light with a lower density than cork and can be cut and shaped with craft knives and hobby tools. The wood also has a nice grain and it can be varnished to look pristine. You're not here for pristine though. I have promised you grimdark. Exaggerating the grain with a wire brush or craft knife is something we can achieve quickly with minimal effort. Balsa wood also comes in a variety of shapes and profiles depending upon your application. For detailing work on modelling wood effects, there is no better, as I shall show you when we cover modelling dry rot upcoming shortly in this tutorial. The downside of balsa wood is because it is such a low density softwood, it is easy to damage. This is bad news for tabletop wargaming, where we roll dice, have miniatures being moved around, rule books on the table, tape measures, and our hands moving here and there. If you're going to use balsa wood, it needs to be protected or supported by more durable materials. That brings us on to coffee stirrers and lollipop sticks as a material with greater structural durability. They are made from betula wood, harvested from the silver birch tree. It is a smooth wood that is sturdy and non-splintering. This is a good material to support any balsa wood that needs shoring up. It isn't as good at taking detail as balsa, but it is possible to indent and carve wood grain into the surface. I make use of resin cast pieces by Spellcrow to add in some lovely looking wood grain with knots in the wood for high visibility areas on the gaming table where you want to draw the eye. These are a lot more expensive than using coffee stirrers and balsa wood, granted, but we are talking pennies, however, for the wood construction. The Spellcrow resin is no doubt affordable, and will go a long way in your builds. I use both the wooden floor and wooden planks to add that little bit of pizzazz. If you would like to try these sets out for yourself, I have added some affiliate links in the description. There is no additional cost to you, and I'll get a small kickback on any sales I refer that will go back into making this channel run and improve. For a truly bespoke and realistic looking finish, there is always the route of sculpting the wood planks yourself. This is the most time consuming of the methods and the most technically challenging, especially if you're not comfortable with sculpting. Teaching the method and techniques is beyond the scope of this episode. If you do want to give this a try, then please follow the link to an in-depth tutorial entirely on this aspect. Before jumping into the tutorial of painting the effects of chipped and flaky painting on our timber, let's take a moment to look at the effect we want to achieve. This is actually a pretty simple paint job. One of the reasons it looks so good is down to the excellent sculpt of the wood grain by this episode's sponsor, Spellcrow. This wonderful miniature wargaming company is well known within the Warhammer circles for the custom bits they produce for Space Marines, Chaos Marines, Orcs and Eldar. Did you also know that they create their own fantasy game called Turris? They also hand sculpt and manufacture a wide range of scenery for both fantasy and sci-fi wargames. The emphasis that I placed on wet rot is on the environmental impact of mildew, rising damp and moss deposit. There can be a number of discolorations present, with the wood appearing green, black, patches of white and spots of yellow. Moisture in the wood also makes it expand, contract, shrinking, sometimes cracking. This can be modelled with gaps forming between planks. The overall dampness of the wood also makes it softer than usual. Along with the shrinking, it can make wood appear more rounded at its edges from impacts. So then, by modelling an overall more rounded appearance, creating gaps by cutting away parts of the planks where they meet perhaps, adding a crack or two along the grain, and using colour, we can sell the condition of wet rot. Additional extras to build up the wet look may then be included. I like to sieve fine particles of green foam block and adhere them to the surface using gloss varnish. Mildew can be applied by stippling on a desaturated cobalt teal, turquoise or aqua green colour. Finally, a coat of gloss varnish across the entire surface affected by wet rot will make it appear damp and glistening. With this particular model, I have made sure that I've kept away from tan and brown colours that we typically see wood painted in on fantasy miniatures. Instead, I've opted for an all-over colour first of all of Formula P3's Iron Hull Grey, which is a mid-tone grey with a tint of blue. So I've applied that all over. I then went for P3's Bane base. So this is a darker grey, slightly darker grey, and instead of having a blue tinge, it's more of a greeny tinge to it. And this was applied to the lower third of the wood where it is touching the ground. After these two steps, you may have noticed that I gave the model an all-over spray of water. The purpose of this is because in the next step, what I'm going to do is apply some black ink through the airbrush. This can still be done with a hand brush, so don't feel that you need to have an airbrush in order to apply these steps. What happens when we brush the black ink over the wet surface is the capillary action is going to pull that ink into all of those recesses and just give us a nice deep tone. What we are left with are very muted colours on these wooden planks, which mimics very worn planks of wood that haven't had a lot of love or attention for quite some time. They're just being left in the environment, no varnish on them, no treatment to them at all. On top of this base shade of our worn out looking wooden planks, I'm going to apply some weathering effect. My favourite is an enamel paint by Ammo Mig Luminous. It's the Slimy Grime dark colour, which is a nice deep slimy green. I thin this 50-50 with enamel thinners, and again I've applied this through the airbrush. This is to get a very nice, even, controlled coating of the paint on the lower third of the model where it comes into contact with the ground, with a nice gentle fade into the grey wooden finish above. This provides us with a very mossy, lichen type finish with rising damp as it is creeping up the wood surface. With the slimy finish down, I then take a dry brush and I'll dry brush all over the surface with a light grey. In this instance I've used a Citadel base, which is the Celestra Grey. So we just want to give that a light dry brush all over the surface, and that's going to give us that real sort of worn out, washed out kind of look even further to the wood, with the mossy, slimy effect underneath. Finally I come back in with the slimy Grimdark enamel paint, applying that heavily straight from the pot in a very sort of streaky fashion right at the very lowest part of the model where it is in contact with the ground and particularly damp. To model dry rot, I like to emphasise the layers that develop in the wood planks as chunks of wood deteriorate, get dislodged and crumble away. When you are working with actual wood material, it means it also behaves like wood. Taking a sharp hobby knife, cut away a layer or two into the wood. Dry rot will typically occur at the ends and edges of the planks, where the fungal matter that attacks it concentrates its efforts. We can cut away an irregular, wavy line down the length of the plank to particularly age it from the effect of dry rot. The final cut type we can make to the material surface is to mimic how crevices and separations of the wood can occur, making it look similar to the surface of sun-scorched earth. We can replicate the effect using a combination of a sharp hobby knife to cut cracks. Once the wooden planks have been painted to your preference, use earthy coloured dry pigments to dust around all the areas that have been affected by the dry rot. This mimics how the wood has crumbled away to dust. The mycelium fungus that attacks the wood in dry rot can contain yellow spores, turning grey when very old. Dusting your planks with a medium to light grey dry brush or overbrush with limited and controlled spots of yellow stippling will help sell the condition. The way I prefer to use pigment powders is to use a pigment fixer, which is a enamel fluid. So I'll put the pigment fixer down first on top of the paint job where I want the pigments to go, and once I have that down and laid down onto the surface, I can then carefully place the amount of powder that I want into that particular area using the tip of a paintbrush. What is useful to know about pigment powders is that when they come into contact with the pigment fixer, they actually become a much deeper colour. So it releases the pigment within the powders and you get a very dark finish compared to what you'll see in the pot. Also, the pigment powders which come into contact and get suspended and set within the pigment fixer become less dusty compared to if they were just dry powders placed on top of the surface. Because of this, we can use pigment powders in two particular different ways. So the first way I like to do is create a very deep colour in the recesses, and I want to make sure that those pigment powders are going to be set and they're not going to move. So I use the pigment fixer and I set all of that nicely into place, and I do that by sandwiching the pigment powders. So once I've got my pigment fixer fluid, I place down the powders on top of that. I then use some more pigment fixer on top of that layer, just to make sure they are absolutely kept in place. The second way that I use pigment powders is to just apply them dry on top of the surface without needing any pigment fixers at all. And once I've got that deeper set colour in place, I'll then dust over, not the recesses because I want to keep that deep, but the protruding areas and areas around the deeper recesses. And that gives us that lovely dusty particle effect of the wood that has rotted away. The way that I achieve the chipped and flaking paint on woodwork is by using enamel paints. It is important to use enamel over acrylic or any other type of paint because of the properties it exhibits once fully cured. Enamel paints cure to a hard finish, allowing us to crack and break off enamel paint flakes and even crumble them to dust for a variety of special effects. Strange as it might seem, I don't want to paint directly onto the wood planks. To begin with, instead, I paint the enamel colour onto a surface that I can manipulate it on once it's cured. I break the paint into pieces, looking to keep the parts of the puzzle together in case I want to use them to model cracked paint on the wood planks. Using needle tip modelling tweezers, I can then grip the pieces securely but lightly. Where to place the pieces is largely down to your own taste. You can refer to source photos for inspiration and guidance if this helps. One possibility that I personally feel looks realistic and pleasing is to place the pieces near to the top of a long edge of a wooden plank. It is preferable to not be flush with the top edge so that undamaged paint can be applied around the pieces to blend the painted wood into the damaged paint. This goes a long way in selling the stark contrast between the unpainted and potentially damaged wood on the lower length of the wood plank through damaged paint and onto the paint finish applied to the surface. Okay, what did you think of that? Good? Did you learn something new? I hope you can have a go at these and put some of these techniques into practice, and I would love to see them once you have. So contact me through one of the social platforms and show me what you do. That would be fantastic. I'd love to see what you're doing with the techniques that I'm providing here. I hope you all enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed weathering this terrain. If you did, please can you take a moment to press that like button. Let me know in the comment section down below and share it with your favourite hobby groups. If you aren't already subscribed, please be sure to subscribe and set the bell notifications to all to let YouTube know that you enjoyed this type of content, and you'll also make certain that you don't miss out on any more of my content as it's released. If you're looking to do any hobby shopping in the near future and you'd also like to help out the channel at the same time, please be sure to use the links in the description down below. But there is actually an even better way that you can support the channel if you really love and care for what I'm doing here, and that is to become a supporter on Patreon. I would love to have you as the newest member of my inquisitorial retinue. There are Discord server benefits where you can talk directly with me and other like-minded hobbyists that are also creating mind-blowing immersive worlds. Well, that's it for this video, everyone. Thank you very much for watching till the end, and I shall see you in the next one. Until then, look after you and yours, and I shall see you then.